Well, it's showtime in Harare, and I'm sure you've set aside time to visit the rebranded Zimbabwe Agricultural Show, which started yesterday, ending on Saturday. Good evening. Yes, it's a Tuesday, and the program is a Tech Talk. On the Deep Dive, we take an in-depth look at technology and how it impacts our daily lives. We invite experts to walk us through these technologies, and tonight is no exception. I have with me in studio engineer Itai Masuka, as well as Motion Masuka from Intermittent Energy, and tonight we are going to discuss new technologies in farming. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Capital 100.4 FM and of course Tech Talk.
Good evening, Owen. Thank you for having us.
Great. And now, as usual, we are on a Facebook Live. Feel free to share and start a watch party, and let's enjoy Tech Talk together. Now, gentlemen, I'll just start from a very simple place. Have you been to the show?
Yes, I've been to the show. I went on Monday just for a little brief look around. I'll be going back there on Friday. That's normally my day to go.
And you, Motion?
Yes, I went to the show.
And what has been your experience during the brief visit to the show?
There's a lot of new things going on in the industry right now, but I don't think they're really connecting as well with the people. In my personal opinion, I think that we're trying to get to a place whereby people are just presenting new technologies, but the people aren't really, it's not really hitting home. If you were to ask somebody, basically, let's say next week, Monday, what did you gain from the show? What new things did you gain from the show? People will say, I got some shirts, I got this and that. So I really hope they improve on that part of the show. But otherwise, this whole rebranded show, I think that it's a good thing that's happening, and I hope that more people can go to the show. If you haven't gone, still good to go.
Now, of course, in line with the show, we decided to focus on some of the technologies which can assist farmers improve their yield. And with the current power shortages affecting farmers, I think there is no better place to start from than power solutions. What options are available for farmers? I think with the power shortages that we've been experiencing, people would like to know what are the options, what are the technologies around making sure that you've got power in terms of agriculture.
It's just solar is the main. I mean, when you look at alternative power, solar is the main one for farming. But you can also have little mini hydro power plants that have, for instance, I've been in Nyanga, Eastern Highlands. Some farms have some mini hydro power plants to power their power activities. Wind, however, the wind resource assessments in Zimbabwe haven't really gone to an in-depth area yet for us to be able to say you can definitely use wind in this area and that area.
Emotion?
Yes, I think power. We can substitute this issue. I think this issue can also be an opener for all those governments who need to invest in power, because the power, most farmers rely on irrigation, so they rely on electricity. So the farmers need to invest in solar so that they cannot be having these power shortages which can ultimately affect agriculture.
And of course, if you're just joining us, the program is a Tech Talk on Harare's Heartbeat. We are Capital 100.4 FM. My name is Owen Kaura, and tonight in studio I've got Itai Masuka as well as Motion Masuka. Now, these are experts in terms of farming technologies. So we are discussing the latest in terms of new farming technologies. So feel free to join in the conversation on 0717 777. Better still, you can call on 495 112. We started looking at solutions, power solutions, and the gentlemen in studio were talking about solar solutions. But is solar sustainable?
Solar is very sustainable. You just need to, you cannot rely basically by yourself on solar because of the storage. One of the main issues with solar is the storage issue. If there was no issue with storage with solar, we would all just use solar straight away. But over the night, right, we now have to buy batteries, and that's the expensive part of a solar package, is the batteries. So what you normally do, you get what's called a hybrid package. And a hybrid package basically combines, for instance, a generator, a wind turbine, hydro, depending on the area you're in. So for instance, you're in an area where you have good water flow, you can go with the hydro and the solar. Or if you have good wind, you can go with wind and go with solar. Or sometimes fuel is not an option for you. You can go with the generator and solar. So you just need to combine the two or three, or sometimes you can just go with 4 or 5. whichever one happens. Or sometimes what we see now, especially with ZESA coming back, maybe midnight. You just need to make sure that you're able to supply electricity for yourself until that 10 o'clock comes or 6.
It's interesting that you bring in the issue of fossil fuels as well. Now, of course, farming is we use heavy machinery and they need fuel. Now, is there any other way that we can go around the fossil fuel situation? Maybe Motion, you'd want to take that one.
I think in for sure you are saying correctly about I can say, all right, sorry, the issue of fuel consumption of our heavy machinery in agriculture. For sure, we see we have some auto, solar or electric tractors being invented in other countries, and they are also adopted.
Are they now available here in Zimbabwe? Is this an option for us to have electric tractors?
Yes, for sure. It's an option for Zimbabwe to have this. So we need to adopt these technologies in agriculture in Zimbabwe so that we can improve our productivity.
But then, Engineer Itai, are we adopting these technologies?
No, we're not. In fact, we are very, very far behind where we should be in terms of the technologies that we use in this country. For instance, when I've had the privilege of going overseas, you find someone with a farm, 20 hectares, and says, come, let me show you my farm. I go see his 20 hectares. I'm like, my friend, where are your workers? He's like, no, I'm the only one who works here.
So there's just one person.
One guy. I know it begins to come to my head. I'm like, how is one guy doing all of this? It's just farming technology. Everything he can be done is because he's got the help of advanced machinery. Whereas here, we are struggling because you want your labor to do this. The guy didn't wake up in the morning and all that other stuff. So farming technology, if you need to look at it, the technology is now being invented. Will also help cover those gaps of this guy didn't wake up to do this job. There's no fuel for this, no fuel for that. So electric tractors, they should have been adopted. But you know the thing with these electrical things, like I said before, it's the battery storage. That's where the buck comes out. So since it's 4,000 for a tractor, right? That's around the price overseas. For that battery storage for an electrical tractor, you're looking at maybe about 25,000. Which person in Zimbabwe is going to pull out 25,000 US when you can just buy 5 tractors? It doesn't make sense for them in the now. But over the long run, because that tractor definitely is meant to last 10 to 15 years.
All right, interesting. We've got some messages that are coming through on our WhatsApp platform. This one is coming from Jazz. I know Jazz is a great farmer as well. So he says, a great topic. I would not agree with the motion on solar for farming. As farmers, we know solar cannot really sustain irrigation, say for 4 hectares. You would need plenty of panels and batteries. And this means a lot of capital. So Jazz is saying solar is not sustainable.
Let me take that one. 4 hectares is actually very minimal. You actually don't need batteries for solar water pumping. So I think we would need to get in touch with your friend about what kind of advice he has received on that one. Because for solar, for solar irrigation, you don't need batteries. It's just your inverter and your panels. Your panels to the inverter, and your inverter to the pump, and you get your water through. So to say that it's not efficient, there are other people out there who are doing it for 600, 700 hectares. So it just depends on now.
All right, and Motion, do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I also want to add on what Nobel was saying. I think solar, the actual or the first capital needed to be invested might be large, but in the long run, that will be sustainable. Because solar is renewable, there's no need for subscriptions such as what we are doing with the electricity in this country. So this one, solar is natural.
And it's only the initial cost which might
be
on
higher.
the expensive side.
Yes.
All right, and of course, if you are just joining in, you are listening to Capi Talk 100.4 FM. We are Harare's Heartbeat, and the program is Tech Talk with me, Owen Kaura. And tonight on the panel, I have engineer Itai Masuka as well as Emotion Masuka. Now, are you guys related?
Yes.
Great. Just had to find out. And we are discussing the latest farming technologies, and we started from a very simple point. We were talking about the power technologies that are available, and of course we looked into solar, we looked into wind as well, with Jez not really agreeing. They're saying, I don't think solar is really viable, but we need to quickly move on with the show and look at other technologies as well. Now, briefly we spoke about fossil fuels. That's when you brought in the issue of electric tractors and so forth. But now, in line with the Zimbabwe Agricultural Society's 2019 theme for this year's show, technology, innovation, modernization, can this be fully applied to farming or agriculture here in Zimbabwe?
Let me give you a little stat. So around about in the early 1900s, the United States, for instance, given them an example as the most industrialized country on the planet, they were producing about for 70 million, their population was about 76 million. And they used 11 million people to produce that food for that. And around about 2015, they had about 372 million people. And they were using 6.5 million people to produce that. How did they manage to halve their input essentially, but their population increased by about 5? It's because what? They innovated and they modernized. And two of the most important aspects to that modernization and innovation were electricity and also engines. So this is where we're saying our solar and our wind and our hydro would come in. And also with our engines, now we're moving on to things like drones, for instance, or pickers, for instance, these modernized pickers, self-driving tractors as well, that improve our yield and efficiency.
So there is no option. We have to modernize.
We have to modernize.
All right. And now let's also look at how tech in agriculture can improve even the GDP, the gross domestic product of the country.
Can you take it?
The use of technology in agriculture is very important, is essential. So farmers need to adopt technology in agriculture so that we can improve on productivity. So the advantages of technology in agriculture include the efficiency. For example, the use of drones and also the use of modernized irrigation facilities, and also this can improve on the yield, we can say yield and productivity. So that in agriculture we need to use less and also obtaining a higher yield.
We can also go through to our WhatsApp platform. This one is coming from Nyasha in Rua saying, hi Owen, I'm not into farming, but thank you for the great program. I hope the farmers are listening and will implement these tips, because they are the backbone of the economy. So I think farming really is the backbone of Zimbabwe's economy. But now let's just take another look at a different angle. You are very young guys. If you go to our Facebook page, that's Capital FM, you'll see that engineer Itai and as well as Motion Masuka, they're very young people. So what can be done to lure young people into farming? Do we have enough young people taking part in farming?
I think we do. I think there's a lot of young people. But I think one of the issues in Zimbabwe, communication and technology, we are very behind. Okay. So for instance, I'm actually a member of the Zimbabwe Young Farmers Association. So I know that there's a lot of young farmers out there. But the things that you don't hear about these guys, you hear about, Charlene is in Bindura doing this and that, but you don't know what she's doing, how she's doing it. So I think that the use of technology, I think that the organizations as well must use that technology to bring us closer together so that we can also share tips. Because as young people, we go through the same situations, and part of those, I already know some of those situations, such as structural organization. You have a very clear mindset of what you want to do. But now implementing that, because sometimes as young people, we may not have the experience. Yes, we may have the heart and the passion, but we may not have the experience. And some of those things we need to share together. And technology can be, it's like WhatsApp, for instance, how it brings everybody together so that we can all share all these tips. So I think that that's one thing we need to, one of the organizations in terms of bringing young farmers together, is just bringing together, because I think we're there.
All right, on Tech Talk, we usually like to go to our WhatsApp platform and our calls. So we'll just quickly return it to our WhatsApp platform. That's 0717-777-777. This one is coming from Kennedy Ismail saying, you might implement the latest technology in Zimbabwe, but the environment will not be able to sustain the system for long due to less developed structure like internet accessibility and affordability, as well as spare parts, repairs, and so forth. So he's saying it's not sustainable because we don't have the infrastructure. Motion, do you agree?
I partly agree with the listener, But what we need to do is, first of all, our education facilities, for example, the tertiary education, they must equip the graduates with these technologies. And so education is one, communication and support. We need support. This the modernization and the innovation, we say the acceleration and the adoption of technology can only be achieved through support and financial support and technical support. So if even if the government help in supporting the modernization of agriculture, for sure we are going far away.
And just to back up on that, what Motion said, that he partly agrees with it. I disagree with that, because I honestly believe that, what's it called? I honestly believe that for instance, once you buy a car, right? Once cars were invented, did people not begin to build garages? Yes, they did. Because it's also, you begin to make money. Once people bought cars, service stations came through, did they not? So I'm sure that if we now begin to bring in drones, even if we're importing them at the beginning, right, or farm machinery, people will be there to fix it, because it's now an employment. It's opened up employment in the
yes,
country.
because I remember you brought up an analogy where you were talking about when you were overseas, when there was one guy manning the whole farm. But then at the same time, people would say, now that's another problem, employment. But now you bring in a very important point where you say it actually creates employment. So technology also creates and opens up different avenues for employment as well. Let's just quickly go back to our WhatsApp platform. This one is coming up from Cindy in Chitunga, is asking you, Engineer Itai, are you a farmer yourself? How are you managing in this economy?
Yes, I'm a farmer myself. And, I was doing very well. Unfortunately, half of my maize caught fire the other day. So that's a setback for me. But, I'm struggling to cope with these conditions just like anybody else. This is why I was looking into farming technologies. And this is why it's become such a passion for myself.
But then, for example, you're saying you lost half your maize to fire. How then can technology assist in mitigating such
for instance,
disasters?
I had fire guards, which is what you need. But now the story is that I'm being told, the flame went over the top and these. For instance, if I had smoke detectors around my field, if I had a drone, for instance, that was going around my field 3-4 times a day, because now to go around my field, it takes labor and it takes fuel for me to be able to cover, my whole farm. So if I had, invested in these technologies that I'm talking about, I
wouldn't have lost your crop.
I probably wouldn't have lost my crop, which is why this next farming season I've already identified a few machines that I'm looking to bring into my farm.
It's interesting that you bring in the concept of drones as well, which is going to be my next area of concern. It brings in global positioning systems as well, GPS and remote sensing, like you're talking about, sensors and things like that. How do these technologies work?
Can I take some?
The drones.
Yes.
We can say maybe drones are defined as an identifying flying objects. So the drones, the use of drones are equipped with the sensors so that they can monitor. It's like they can move around so you can see the area of view of your farm. So this is very important in agriculture because it helps in management of the farm. Because, for example, drones are used in farm mapping. We can map the farm. We can also even in livestock, we can do the mapping. Drones can be used. Some countries can use drones even in planting.
All right, and here's a compliment coming for you saying Engineer Masuka knows his stuff. These are the new guys that we need in town. And of course, I'd mentioned earlier on that, yes, we are Harare's heartbeat.
And I just wanted to add on that, just to go a little bit in depth on how, for instance, effective drones can be. For instance, fertilizers. One of the main issues, what happens is that we apply what we call blanket application. Okay, whereby you are told that you need to apply 5 milligrams of fertilizer for your crop, irregardless of how your plant is working. Imagine now we're told, Dolos Baba, that you need to get flu jabs because it's winter. That's what they're doing. Everybody, get light. We're not going to jab you for flu. But there's money for that. You need to use money to get all those flu jabs. So what happens with drones now is that they're able to tell the color, with their sensors, they're able to tell the color of how green your crop is, for instance. And they can say, you need to apply fertilizer there. This area you don't need to.
So it's precise.
It's precision farming. That's essentially how drones affect farming. That's their main area, is precision farming. Even with the application of pesticides. In Thailand, actually, I was following, it's called a GS-115, I think, somewhere in Thailand, whereby it's got a reservoir. The drone actually has a reservoir, and you apply pesticides. But the pesticides doesn't apply the whole farm. It only applies to those certain areas that you had previously mapped.
All right, this one is coming on our Facebook platform. This one is Shalene Kunira. Thank you very much for joining us on Facebook. Saying, hi guys, watching. Is there a tech hub for young farmers?
Not that I know of, actually. That's a very good point. Not that I know of.
So I think that's an area you also need to look into as well. Of course, you guys are young farmers and you're using tech. And recently, the president, Emerson Mnangagwa, was actually on a drive saying we need to modernize our farming, or to modernize our agriculture. Now, that call, do you think the older generation, as Itai, the dinosaurs in quotes as they are being called, will be able to adopt such technologies?
For sure, change might be very difficult, but they need to do that. So I think what they need is support, and also is support technically and financially.
We've got a lot to cover in terms of agriculture and technology, and 30 minutes is always a very, very short time. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this week's edition of Tech Talk on Capital 100.4 FM. But of course, I won't let you go without a final word. I'll start with you, Motion.
I think for all farmers, whether you are young or old, I need to say Zimbabwe, we need to change our ways from the traditional and conventional agriculture, and we need to modernize, and we need to accelerate the modernization of agriculture in Zimbabwe for us to move forward.
And Engineer Itai, what do you think is the future of farming in Zimbabwe?
One thing I quickly wanted to say is that as farmers, we should do research. You know, myself hasn't been a farmer for a couple of years. The earlier years, I just used to get a book, from the organizations that you do, whether you're doing tobacco or maize, and it just tells you do this when it's time. I encourage farmers to do research. Why we need to do this, when you need to do that, because this blanket farming method makes it very, very, very inefficient. You can save up to 50% of the fertilizer you apply. Some people even say 3 times as much. That's about 30 to 40% of your input, money-wise. And imagine if you're doing like 100-hectare crop, you're saving nearly 40,000 bucks just on input, just on doing that research. So I say to the older generation as well, embrace change, guys.
Embrace change, indeed. And P. Kennedy Ismail, you've got the last say on Tech Talk tonight, saying, are these guys taking practical situations applicable to the Zimbabwean situation? Seriously, technology is an investment which is very expensive. How many people can afford to irrigate 4 hectares using solar in Zimbabwe? A starting point for a farmer is inputs as fertilizers, seeds, etc. By the time one is done, you'll be in debt before you can even think of investing in latest technology. So he's got the final word. And that's it for Tech Talk tonight, and hopefully, gentlemen, you'll be able to join us again in future programs. Thank you very much for being a part of Tech Talk, and of course, thank you to the listener for taking part and listening and tuning in to Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat.
Thank you very much, Owen.
Thank you, sir.